In the heart of Anambra, there lived a kind, elderly widow named Mama Nkemdili. Life had never been easy for her, but she endured every hardship with grace. From the moment she lost her husband, she dedicated herself fully to raising her only son, Obinna. Every coin she earned from selling food in the market went into his schooling. Every sleepless night was spent praying for his future. People in the village often said, "Obinna is blessed, for his mother's love is his covering." Indeed, he grew into a fine young man, responsible, respectful, and deeply grateful for the sacrifices his mother had made. Their small home, though modest, was always filled with laughter, warmth, and the aroma of Mama Nkemdili's cooking. When Obinna finally found love in a young woman named Amara, the entire household rejoiced. Mama Nkemdili was delighted that her son had chosen a wife, and she welcomed Amara with open arms. She prepared a feast that day, neighbors gathered, and the air was filled with songs and dancing. To Mama Nkemdili, Amara was not just a daughter-in-law, she was a daughter sent by God to complete their family. She prayed silently, thanking the heavens that her son would never again feel the loneliness of an empty home. In the weeks that followed, the family's joy seemed complete. Obinna beamed with pride as he walked with Amara in the village, always holding her hand. Mama Nkemdili's heart swelled with happiness, watching the young couple build their new life together under her roof. Every evening, she would sit in the compound, smiling as they teased each other, sharing dreams of children and a bright future. To the outside world, theirs was a perfect picture of harmony and love, a home built on sacrifice, now blossoming into fulfillment. Yet behind Amara's gentle smile, something darker hid in the shadows of her heart. Each time she saw her husband lean toward his mother, seeking advice or sharing laughter, an ember of jealousy flickered. She masked it carefully, smiling sweetly at Mama Nkemdili, but inside she whispered words only her heart could. And though the household remained lively and cheerful, an unseen storm had quietly begun to gather. At first, Amara tried to fit into the warmth of her new home, but slowly, a shadow of unease began to grow in her heart. Each day, she noticed how Obinna leaned toward his mother before making any decision. If it was about money, he would ask Mama Nkemdili's advice. If it was about planting season, he trusted his mother's wisdom. Even when Amara cooked, Obinna would smile and say, "It tastes almost like Mama's food," not realizing how those words pierced her pride. To outsiders, Mama Nkemdili's presence was a blessing, but to Amara, it felt like competition for her husband's affection. The seed of jealousy planted itself quietly. Amara began to compare every gesture, every word, every smile. Whenever Obinna laughed with his mother, her heart tightened. At night, when she lay beside him, she replayed the day in her mind, bitterly counting how many times he praised Mama Nkemdili compared to her. What started as small irritation grew into silent resentment. She began to feel invisible, like a guest in her own home. When her friends visited, Amara would pour out her frustrations. She whispered angrily, her voice low but sharp. "This house can only have one queen," she told them, her eyes burning with determination. Her friends giggled, some encouraging her, others warning her to be careful. But Amara's mind was already clouded. She believed Mama Nkemdili was deliberately holding on to power, controlling her son's heart, and limiting her own authority as a wife. The once sweet smiles she offered her mother-in-law became forced. When Mama Nkemdili suggested something, Amara would nod politely, but deep inside, her anger boiled. She began to keep her distance, refusing to join in their conversations. The more she isolated herself, the more bitterness consumed her. To the outside world, Amara remained the perfect wife, but inside the walls of her heart, jealousy had found a permanent seat. It whispered to her daily, reminding her of her vow. No one, not even her husband's beloved mother, would take her place as queen of the house. Mama Nkemdili had lived long enough to understand that a storm never begins with thunder. It starts with small winds, easy to ignore. At first, she brushed it aside when her favorite pot of soup tasted oddly bitter, though she had cooked it with her own hands. She blamed herself, thinking perhaps old age was dulling her senses. But when it happened again, and the taste was strange though the ingredients were fresh, her heart whispered a warning. Then came the missing medicine. Every evening, she kept her tablets carefully in a small wooden box by her bedside. One night, when she reached for them, they were gone. She searched the room quietly, her frail fingers trembling, only to find them later tucked in the corner under a cloth she had not touched. Confusion filled her mind. She wanted to believe it was only her forgetfulness, but deep within, she knew someone had moved them. Mama Nkemdili said nothing. Instead, she carried her unease to God in prayer. Late at night, when Obinna and Amara were asleep, she knelt by her bed, whispering, "Lord, if my eyes see wrongly, forgive me, but if danger hides in this house, reveal it." Tears rolled down her wrinkled cheeks as she prayed, her voice breaking with both fear and love. She tried to dismiss her thoughts, telling herself that perhaps the changes in her food and medicine were mistakes, accidents, nothing more. Yet the quiet signs began to add up. A jug of water she left in the kitchen suddenly had a bitter aftertaste. Her favorite wrapper went missing for days, only to be found tossed carelessly behind the house. Little things, each one small, but together forming a shadow she could not ignore. Still, Mama Nkemdili chose silence. She did not want to burden her son or bring quarrels into the home. Instead, she held her suspicions inside, smiling faintly by day and weeping softly by night. But the unease in her heart only grew stronger, and though she prayed for peace, the whispers of danger refused to leave her soul. Obinna loved Amara so deeply that it blinded him to the things happening around him. To him, she was more than a wife. She was his treasure, the woman who filled his home with laughter and beauty. Whenever he looked at her, he forgot the struggles he once endured, and that made him determined to protect her from any criticism. So when whispers reached his ears that Amara did not respect his mother, he brushed them aside as lies fueled by envy. One afternoon, an elderly neighbor stopped him by the roadside and gently said, "My son, be watchful. A woman who cannot honor your mother may not honor you." But before the man could continue, Obinna raised his hand and shook his head firmly. "Amara is my peace," he said with pride. "Do not speak against her again." His tone carried such certainty that the neighbor walked away in silence. To everyone who tried to caution him, his answer remained the same. Amara could do no wrong. Inside the house, Mama Nkemdili noticed his blindness and carried her pain quietly. When Amara spoke harshly, Obinna pretended not to hear. When she ignored her mother-in-law's needs, he looked the other way. Sometimes, when neighbors dropped subtle hints, Obinna would laugh, insisting that people simply misunderstood his wife. His love had built a wall that blocked out the truth. Mama Nkemdili, though hurt, refused to argue. She did not want her son to see her as an enemy to his marriage. Each night, she prayed in silence, whispering, "Lord, help my child see the truth." But in the mornings, she wore her usual smile, though her eyes betrayed the sorrow she carried. The villagers began to pity her. They saw her patience, they saw her son's blindness, and they shook their heads. Yet Mama Nkemdili endured it all, believing that love for her son meant bearing this quiet suffering. And Obinna, lost in his devotion, never realized that the very peace he spoke of was slowly turning into the silence before a storm. The evening was quiet, the kind of night when the moonlight bathed the compound in peace. Mama Nkemdili had just finished sweeping the yard and was humming softly as she folded her wrapper. She enjoyed these moments of stillness, watching the stars, feeling grateful for life. Inside, Amara sat with folded arms, her face twisted with irritation. The sight of the old woman moving about freely in the home gnawed at her. For weeks, she had hidden her resentment behind polite smiles, but that night, her patience snapped. As Mama Nkemdili entered the room, carrying a small tray of fruit for the family, Amara's voice cut sharply through the air. "Mama, don't you think it's time you give us our space? You have overstayed your welcome in this house." The words dropped like stones, heavy and cruel. The room fell into silence. Mama Nkemdili froze, the tray trembling in her hands, her eyes clouding with tears. She had never expected such harshness from the woman she embraced as a daughter. Her lips parted, but no words came. Instead, she lowered her head, quietly retreating into her room, her shoulders shaking as she wept in silence. Obinna sat stunned, his chest tightening at his wife's outburst. He looked at Amara, disturbed by her tone, but love tied his tongue. Instead of correcting her, he sighed deeply, rubbed his forehead, and remained silent. His heart felt heavy, but he convinced himself it was just anger, just a slip of words, nothing more. He refused to acknowledge the storm forming inside his home. Amara, on the other hand, felt triumphant. She believed she had finally claimed her space, finally silenced the shadow she thought threatened her place as queen of the house. But Mama Nkemdili, alone in her room, whispered through tears, "God, give me strength to endure." And Obinna, though disturbed, chose peace over truth, blind to the fact that silence was no longer protecting his family, but slowly breaking it apart. The air in the house was heavy that evening, though no one could explain why. Amara stood alone in the kitchen, her hands trembling as she stirred the pot of soup. Her heart pounded, not from fear, but from the burning jealousy that had taken root inside her. For weeks, she had battled with the presence of Mama Nkemdili, feeling overshadowed, feeling like a stranger in her own home. Tonight, she convinced herself that peace could only come if the old woman was gone. She reached into a small pouch hidden beneath her wrapper, pulling out a dark powder she had kept secretly. Her eyes darted around the kitchen to ensure no one was watching. Slowly, carefully, she sprinkled it into Mama Nkemdili's portion of food. The substance dissolved quickly, leaving no trace. Amara stirred again, her lips pressed tightly together. For a moment, she hesitated, but jealousy whispered in her ear, drowning out the last bit of conscience. With a deep breath, she lifted the tray and arranged the dishes neatly, masking her intent with perfection. When she entered Mama Nkemdili's room, her face carried the sweetest of smiles. "Mama, your food is ready," she said gently, setting the tray before her mother-in-law as though it were an act of kindness. Mama Nkemdili, weary from the day, smiled faintly. Her tired hands reached for the spoon, but before lifting it, she bowed her head to pray. Her voice trembled as she whispered, "Lord, bless this food before me. May it give me strength. May it keep me safe." Her prayer was soft, but carried the weight of her faith. Amara's heart raced, her eyes fixed on every movement, waiting for the spoon to touch her lips. And then, just as Mama Nkemdili finished her prayer and raised the spoon, the sound of the front door echoed through the house. The creak was loud, startling both women. Amara froze, her eyes widening in shock, while Mama Nkemdili's trembling hand paused mid-air. The quiet night suddenly held its breath, and the secret plan was on the edge of exposure. Obinna pushed the door open quietly, stepping into the house earlier than usual. The long day at work had ended sooner, and all he wanted was to surprise his family with his presence. But the moment he entered, the air felt strange, too still, too heavy. His eyes caught Amara standing stiffly in the corner of the room, her hands clasped tightly together. She flinched at the sound of the door, her forced smile betraying a nervousness she could not hide. He looked at his mother. Mama Nkemdili sat before a tray of steaming food, her hand trembling as she lifted the spoon toward her lips. Obinna's chest tightened. Something about the scene felt wrong. The rich aroma of the soup filled the air, but instead of comfort, it carried a sharpness that made his senses uneasy. He paused by the door, silently watching, his instincts sharpening with every second. Amara's eyes flickered nervously from him to Mama Nkemdili, then back again. She forced a laugh, her voice slightly shaky. "Oh, you're home early, my husband. Come, sit. Let me bring you food." But her eagerness sounded rehearsed, too hurried, like someone trying to cover tracks. Obinna's gaze lingered on her, his brow furrowed. He noticed the way her hands would not stay still, the way her breathing came uneven. His eyes shifted back to his mother, who now hesitated, her prayer still echoing faintly in the room. Her hand trembled so badly that the spoon rattled against the bowl. "Are you all right, Mama?" Obinna asked softly, stepping closer. His voice was calm, but his heart was restless. He could feel a storm building, though he could not yet name it. Mama Nkemdili forced a small smile, whispering, "I am fine, my son." But Obinna saw the fear in her eyes, the unease she could not hide. He stood still, silent, his gaze moving between the two women. Suspicion began to cloud his face. Something was not right. He could not yet speak it, but in his heart, Obinna knew. This night would not end like the others. Mama Nkemdili lifted the spoon slowly, her frail hand shaking as though her spirit already knew danger lurked on the plate. Just before the soup touched her lips, Obinna lunged forward, his hand closing firmly around her wrist. "Mama, wait," he said, his voice tense, eyes fixed on the steaming bowl. Amara froze, her heart pounding like a drum. Obinna's gaze shifted sharply to his wife. "Amara," he said, his tone steady but filled with suspicion. "Taste this food." The words struck her like thunder. For a moment, silence wrapped the room. Amara's lips parted, but no sound came. Her eyes darted toward the door, then to the floor, then back to her husband. She forced a shaky laugh. "Why should I? The food is for Mama." But Obinna stepped closer, his face hardening. "Taste it," he repeated, this time like a command. The weight in his voice made Mama Nkemdili gasp softly, her heart racing. Amara's fingers trembled as she reached for the spoon. She dipped it into the soup, raising it halfway, but her hand stalled. Beads of sweat rolled down her forehead, betraying her fear. Obinna's eyes burned into her, his chest rising and falling heavily. "Eat it, Amara," he pressed, his voice breaking the silence like a whip. Tears welled in Mama Nkemdili's eyes as she realized what was unfolding before her. Her lips moved in silent prayer, her heart breaking at the thought that the daughter she embraced had plotted such evil. Finally, Amara dropped the spoon back into the bowl with a loud clatter. Her knees buckled, and she fell to the floor, crying uncontrollably. "Forgive me," she screamed, her voice raw. The truth spilled into the room like fire, filling every corner with shock and betrayal. Mama Nkemdili clutched her chest, gasping in horror, unable to believe her worst fears had come true. Obinna's face twisted with rage and grief as he looked down at his wife, the woman he once called his peace. His heart shattered, yet his voice was sharp as a blade. "You tried to kill my mother." Amara collapsed to her knees, her sobs filling the room. She clung to the edge of Obinna's trousers, her face wet with tears. "Forgive me, my husband. I was blinded by jealousy. I didn't mean to harm Mama. Please don't cast me away." Her voice cracked with desperation, but Obinna stood over her like a stone, his eyes blazing with both anger and heartbreak. The commotion had drawn neighbors to the compound. They gathered at the doorway, whispering in shock as they pieced together what had happened. The whispers grew louder, some shaking their heads, others murmuring prayers. "How could a wife plan such evil against her mother-in-law?" one woman muttered. The shame of it all burned Amara's heart, but still she pleaded, beating her chest in regret. Obinna raised his voice, his words sharp as a whip. "All this time, Mama warned me, but I refused to see. I called you my peace, Amara, yet you brought poison into my home. You tried to destroy the very woman who gave me life." His voice thundered through the compound, his grief spilling over. The neighbors fell silent, watching as a man's trust shattered before their eyes. Mama Nkemdili wept quietly in her chair, her frail hands clutching her wrapper. With trembling steps, she rose and placed a hand on her son's arm. Through her tears, she whispered, "My son, do not let anger destroy you. Show her mercy." Her voice shook, but carried wisdom. Then she added, her words heavy with truth, "But remember this. A wife who cannot honor a mother cannot honor a home." The neighbors nodded, the weight of her words striking deep. Obinna's chest heaved as he looked between the woman he once adored and the mother he nearly lost. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by Amara's cries. The judgment of the night was clear, and every heart in that room knew the household would never be the same again. The compound was heavy with silence, broken only by Amara's sobs as she knelt on the floor, pleading for forgiveness. Obinna stood tall, his face hardened by betrayal. His eyes carried both sorrow and fury as he looked at the woman he once called his peace. Slowly, he shook his head. "Amara," he said, his voice low but firm, "you have crossed a line no love can repair. You tried to take my mother's life, and with that, you have taken away my trust. I cannot share a home with someone who brings poison where there should be love." Amara cried louder, reaching out to touch him, but Obinna stepped back. Neighbors, still gathered at the doorway, watched in silence, some shaking their heads in pity. Her wails echoed through the night, but Obinna's decision was firm. He called 2 women from the crowd and asked them to help Amara pack her things. She must leave this house, he declared. A home cannot stand on lies, jealousy, and hatred. The neighbors nodded in agreement, their eyes heavy with judgment. As Amara's belongings were gathered, she clung to Obinna one last time, but he gently pushed her hands away. Her cries faded as she was led out of the compound, leaving behind a trail of shame and regret. For the first time, Obinna felt the weight of reality pressing hard on his chest. He turned to his mother, his eyes softening with guilt. "Mama," he whispered, falling to his knees before her. "Forgive me. I was blind. I chose love without wisdom, and it nearly cost me your life. Never again will I let my heart be so clouded." Tears filled Mama Nkemdeli's eyes as she pulled her son into her embrace. "My son," she said gently, "love is beautiful, but it must be built on respect and truth." Obinna held her tightly, vowing never to fail her again. And as the night drew to a close, his heart carried the lesson forever. The true strength of a home is not built on wealth or beauty, but on respect and love that poison can never destroy.